Hey guys, have a listen at the worst take, the absolute worst take I've heard this offseason.
I love that Russ is a man of faith because he's going to need God to revive his career. Pittsburgh is where quarterbacks go to die. Byron Leftwich, Mike Vick, their careers, they came to an end in Pittsburgh. Charlie Batch, his career came to an end in Pittsburgh. Dennis Dixon, his career came to an end in Pittsburgh. Kenny Pickett, his career as a starter came to an end in Pittsburgh. Mitch Trubisky, his career as a starter came to an end in Pittsburgh. Mason Rudolph, his career came to an end in Pittsburgh. Devlin Duck Hodges. Every quarterback that Mike Tomlin acquired. Their careers, they come to an end there. I'm not making this up. This is every quarterback.
What is this list?
This is easily the worst take of the offseason. I don't even know where to start. This is, again, easily the worst take of the offseason and probably deserves to be in the Hall of Fame of terrible takes. Like, the fact that he brought up quarterbacks for the Steelers during the Tomlin era that were never supposed to even start or play at all to begin with and say that their careers died in Pittsburgh. And because of that, just that statement right there is just inaccurate, just asinine in and of itself. But then to use that statement and say, because of that, Russ's career ain't going to work out either. Holy hell. Holy hell. Like, these dudes that he listed off were never even supposed to play to begin with. They were brought here to back up Ben Roethlisberger. At least 80 to 90% of the names that he mentioned. So let's go over them. Byron Leftwich. His career as a starter ended when he was benched for David Garrard in Jacksonville. Was brought here to back up 7. Vic. He was washed at the time. The Steelers picked him up. The year prior, he couldn't even be out. Geno Smith for the starting job in New York. We all knew what it was when we signed Vic. You were going to be Big Ben's backup. That's the stage of his career he was in. Charlie Batch. When he was initially brought to Pittsburgh, wasn't it like him and Maddox competing to be the starter? Maddox won out. Obviously, he had that little run for a year or two. And Batch was still around, but then we draft Ben Roethlisberger in the first round, and I think Batch's best chance to stick around with the Steelers and probably make the best career that he can in the NFL was to be here as a backup. And ultimately, that's what he did because, we were never going to have Charlie Batch be the starter over Ben Roethlisberger. Instead, Batch made a hell of a career out of being 7's backup. Dennis Dixon, he was drafted to be a backup. He was picked whenever Ben was in his prime. I don't think anyone had high hopes of him being the franchise or being a starter. Josh Dobbs, kind of same thing. I don't think there were high hopes of Dobbs being the franchise or a future starter. Like Kevin Colbert never said that they had a first-round grade on him like they did with Mason Rudolph. Ultimately, had a good little run here in Pittsburgh, being a backup. Obviously, the last year and a half, got some chances outside of Pittsburgh to be a starter. And I think he's going to stick around in the league for I don't know, the foreseeable future, for the years to come. As a backup, I think his days as a starter are over. Bruce Gradkowski, he was firmly a backup at the stage of his career whenever the Steelers signed him. Landry Jones, kind of same thing with Josh Dobbs. Big Ben in his prime. Landry Jones was a 5th-round pick. Hey, best you could do is probably just be a backup during that time, which is what he did for, 4 or 5 years here. No expectations for him to overtake Ben Roethlisberger. Duck Hodges, essentially a 4th stringer that became a 3rd stringer after we traded Dobbs away. Was never supposed to play to begin with. We had a little run with him where we got back into playoff contention, but he resorted back to what you could probably expect from Duck Hodges coming out of, was it a D2 school? Undrafted out of a D2 school, and we lost a couple games, went on a bad stretch, and finished 8-8. Didn't come back with the Steelers the following offseason. He tried out with the Rams. And over there, you got to think too, he's got this QB whisperer coach in Sean McVay, but then still couldn't hang around there. So, Duck Hodges, come on. I can't believe you bring that name up and say, Duck Hodges didn't exactly work out in Pittsburgh, so Russ isn't going to work out. What? Duck was a 4th stringer, undrafted dude out of Sanford. Come on. I think there's a little bit of a difference between that and Russell Wilson's situation. No? And the crazy part is, you look at all these names, going back to what I said at the beginning, like all these names I just mentioned, I think they were pretty successful at their job of being a backup here. Like, I look back at all these guys' tenure, I'm like, yeah, they did what they're supposed to do. I look at all these guys and their tenure here at Pittsburgh pretty positively, actually. Seriously. And then to say yeah, that's the crazy part, man. That's the crazy part. To use backups who were successful at their job and say I can't even make it make sense. Like, I can't even make it make sense. Like, Russ is here to be a starter. These situations are very, very different. Now, I will say this. I did leave out 3 names whenever I was going through the list of names right there and giving you a recap of how their careers here in Pittsburgh went. The 3 names I left out are guys that were brought here to be starters post-Ben. Mitch Trubisky, Mason Rudolph, and Kenny Pickett. At least one of those guys could have staked the claim of being the starter here, right? But again, I think it's a very, very different situation with those 3 guys. Kenny, draft pick, unproven. Mason, we got to see him in 2019, man. There was a reason why we signed Mitch and we drafted Pickett whenever Ben retired, because it was just Mason and Haskins on the roster at the time. I don't think the Steelers organization had full faith in Mason Rudolph being the future of the franchise. Just like 95% of the fans, or probably more at that time, 100%. 100% of the fans, I don't think anyone would have been thrilled with Mason Rudolph being the starting quarterback for the Steelers in 2022. If we didn't sign Mitch and we didn't draft Pickett and we were just like, Mason, here are the keys, I don't think anyone would have been happy about that, because we got to see Mason in 2019 and we got to see him in spot starts before that. I don't think anyone was gung-ho about him being the franchise, right? And then with Mitch, that was a flyer signing. His career as a starter ended in Chicago. He became a backup with the Bills, and he spent that 1 year with the Bills, got his credit up, and wanted to see if he could reclaim starter potential somewhere else. And ultimately he picked here, and yeah, we know it didn't work out. But these are very, very different circumstances here. You got Russell Wilson, 9-time Pro Bowler, future Hall of Famer, Super Bowl champion. We're comparing his effort to become the Steelers franchise quarterback versus, again, all the backups that Acho listed. But let's actually try to make it more of an apples to apples comparison, because Russ versus Leftwich, Vick, Batch, Dixon, Gradkowski, like, that's apples to oranges. It's not even worth talking about, to be honest with you. So let's talk about the guys that were brought here to be a starter, or at least had a chance to be a starter. And that's Pickett, Mason, Mitch. That's what we had going over the last 2 years. And then this year, this offseason, we bring in Russ. I think just right there, there's a lot of differences. A lot of differences. I already mentioned Russell Wilson being very, very, very established. You got Pickett, who was a draft pick. Mason, he was a draft pick too, obviously. And I think why I bring him up too is he was drafted with the potential to be the heir apparent to Ben at the time, with that type of potential. Kevin Colbert says, we had a first-round grade on him. Yeah. So, like, that's why I include him here too. I don't think he was just drafted to be a backup. And then Mitch, again, flyer signing just to see if he could maybe be a starter again in the league. But his resume versus Russell Wilson's in the league up to the point where they signed with the Steelers, night and day. Not even close. It's not even close. Now, I will say, did Tomlin do a disservice to a Pickett or to a Mason, guys that we drafted and were viewing as potentially being the franchise down the road? Yeah, I think so. We know both their stories. Pickett came in here and had Matt Canada as his coordinator. Kind of tough. Mason never really got that full opportunity to compete with the likes of Trubisky and Pickett in these past 2 off seasons. But you can also say some of their poor play or just some of the lackluster quarterback play at times when Kenny was in there or when Mason was in there, like, that was on them too. Mason in 2019, like, he wasn't the Mason that we saw at the end of 2023. Very, very, very much of a contrast there between those 2 Mason Rudolphs. Big contrast. And then with Kenny, he could have played better last year. I'll admit that. And he got injured. So, like, you look at it, you could say, man, yeah, I guess Tomlin didn't do completely right by a couple quarterbacks that we had in-house that were actually scheduled to be starters here. But, yeah, they also didn't do right by themselves either. So you have Russell Wilson coming in here with the resume that he's got versus Pickett being drafted as a rookie, Mason and Mitch. You know, that combo getting their chance to be a starter. I think it's a little different. No, a little different. And the speed bump that I was talking about, I guess you could use in all 3 of those quarterbacks scenarios here in Pittsburgh. Canada, he's not even here anymore. And this is where the Acho take gets even worse. Because not only are you bringing in a guy in Russell Wilson who had 29 total touchdowns last year in 15 games with the Denver Broncos, who have a much worse roster and just infrastructure on offense compared to the Steelers heading into this year. Not only do you do that, but you get rid of Matt Canada and bring in Arthur Smith, who is a proven offensive coordinator and had a ton of success down in Tennessee. But this is where Acho takes it instead.
The OC, Arthur Smith, for the Steelers, he has not developed a quarterback. Marcus Mariota, Taylor Heineke, Ryan Tannehill. Furthermore, Desmond Ridder. I don't like OCs that are former head coaches because you can have too many cooks in the kitchen.
The Arthur Smith hasn't developed a quarterback line is something pretty laughable there. Like, the reason Arthur Smith has a job here as an offensive coordinator, got a job to be a head coach with the Atlanta Falcons, is because of what he did in Tennessee and reinvigorating Ryan Tannehill's career there. Like, come on, bro. Like, he got Ryan Tannehill paid. That Titans offense was like top 5 in both those years where Arthur Smith was the offensive coordinator. Like, what? What? People were talking about Ryan Tannehill like actually being a good quarterback when Arthur Smith was there. Arthur Smith leaves and Tannehill goes back to earth. Come on, bro. Come on. Yeah, it didn't work out perfectly with some of those Falcons quarterbacks, but I don't know what offensive coordinator in the league or offensive-minded head coach is making it work down there in Atlanta with the quarterbacks that they had these last couple seasons. I don't know, man. I don't know. So you have Russ here coming off of 29 touchdowns, has a proven offensive coordinator, good running game, good running backs in Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, good offensive line, presumably good offensive line. I know we just drafted a couple dudes in Fautanu, Zach Frazier, Broderick Jones was our first-round pick last year. We also brought in Isaac Seumalo, James Daniel. Like, on paper, our offensive line should be at least above average, at least. So good O-line, good run game, good running backs. You got a star wide receiver in the making in George Pickens. Yeah, wide receiver too, a little bit of a question mark, but we do have some proven guys in-house. Some proven guys with uncertainty at the same time, if you get what I'm saying. But we also drafted Roman Wilson. Got a good tight end in Pat Freiermuth. Got some good depth at the tight end position. Like, yeah, I think that's going to be enough to win games and have good offensive output on a week in and week out basis. I think that's a pretty damn good formula for an offense. And the other weird part is Acho even says as much.
I don't have enough evidence to suggest that Russ will revive his career there. I think they will win a lot of games because the Steelers are a well-coached organization. Joy, I don't think he'll revive his career. I'm done talking. I've talked too much.
So you mean to tell me we're going to win games with Russell Wilson, but he's not going to revive his career? Like, You know the Herm Edwards line.
Hello? You play to win the game.
What else is there? We're going to win games under Russell Wilson. So how is that not going to be, in a way, reviving his career? I don't know. I don't know. If he put up 29 touchdowns with the Broncos last year, I'm assuming he could at least do something like that here in Pittsburgh with the better offensive surroundings here. Yeah, I would take my bet that Russ does do good things because I don't think he's going to play bad. I mean, that's the first thing. I don't think he's going to play bad enough. You look at the play that we got from the combination of Kenny Pickett and Mr. Trubisky last year. Obviously, Mason was the shining light in the quarterback room. But you look at that, if Russ can do at least that, we're going to win games. But, I mean, I think he's going to do a fair amount better than the combination of Kenny and Mitch. So, we were 7-4 when Kenny went down. Mitch obviously came in and lost those 3 games in a row. Mason balled out, went 3-0 to finish the season. But, bro, it's 10-7 with that trio of quarterbacks. 10-7. Come on, man. This was probably the worst take I've heard this offseason. Worst take I've heard. We've heard a lot of bad takes over the years. This is definitely the worst one of 2024. Deserves to probably be in the Hall of Fame. But let me know your thoughts. Stay chilling. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.